Okay, the fact that the pretendians don't take credit for having built a civilization that got melted and go along with the narrative that there's some actual cave carvers out here, people that are carving into these mountains supposedly, is all over the world. There was a worldwide civilization built by the A00 haplogroup, now commonly known as Tartaria, and it got usurped many times over. We've gone through at least 5 resets. And yeah, this is meltology. You know, thanks to everybody in the meltology Facebook groups. This is the reality of the situation. As you can see, the mountains are the buildings. So whenever you look at mountains, for the most part, they are melted metropolises. This is a pretty good book on the matter. You have to DM me for the information. I've been banned on Amazon, as well as all my other books. Not only is America Egypt because it has more pyramids than the rest of the world, it's also Israel, Babylon, Greece, Rome, and it is Shemite land. And as you can see, these pyramids were buried not that long ago, and they've been refurbished for the most part. But whenever you look at Cahokia mounds or different mountains or different supposed rock formations, a lot of them are just remnants of the civilization that once was. It was a worldwide civilization. Many people call it Tartaria. It came from America. The A00 haplogroup started in America and spawned out from there. This gives you an idea of what we mean when we say meltology. The original Giza Plateau is the Grand Canyon. Obviously, that's why a lot of the peaks are named after supposed Kemetic deities, what have you. And it's not only the Grand Canyon. Many remnants of the names of the places are here, like Sedona is Sidon. And if you look into people like James Adair, who wrote the book about the history of the Native Americans, he said that they spoke Hebrew. And one of the first explorers of the Americas, Verrazano, he said they were dark in color, not unlike the Ethiopians. He also said that they were broad in the face, but they had many different face types. America is the epicenter of man. All people, all faces stem from the Americas. But the host is the A00 haplogroup, and until order is restored, there will never be harmony on this earth. We'll have ceasefires at best. Taylor Durden on YouTube, _Taylor Durden on Instagram, patreon.com/Taylor Durden. Okay, the fact that the pretendians don't take credit for having built a civilization that got melted and go along with the narrative that there's some in the 1600s, let's examine it. All across the realm, we see evidence of infrastructure covered in dirt, ash, and pulverized buildings. There are melted structures throughout the realm, but this is just the surface. Much of what we call mountains are actually melted metropolises, and much of what we call caves are actually components of those metropolises. There are underground cities throughout the realm, but were they always underground? These are extremely elaborate. When you see a so-called mountain, this is what you're actually seeing: a labyrinth of networks beneath the surface. Pyramid in Bosnia, which is bigger than the biggest one in Egypt, also has an underground labyrinth. Look. The longest so-called cave system is in America, though. Look at the subtropolis of Kansas City. This is from the so-called construction of the New York subway. You can see those bricks are way older. This is an excavation project, not a construction project. The Cheyenne Mountain Complex wasn't built, it was discovered. Similar to the Iowa State Capitol in all its glory back there, while they make these rudimentary retaining walls for it that do not match it at all. It also has a tunnel system beneath it that was excavated and reinforced. The metallic library points to a worldwide grid. Look at Notre Dame, a city beneath the city. Even down under in Melbourne. Pompeii is one of the best and most common examples of a city that was buried and then excavated. However, there is a conflict in the timeline because the screws and the tools found don't match the time period. Look. Pompeii was supposedly buried in 79 AD, but metal screws weren't available until the 15th century. The timeline does not add up. Supposedly, the Three Graces painting was found in Pompeii, but didn't exist until the 1500s. It's the same thing with the Vatican. It was supposedly built in the 1600s, but the mosaic. There was a reset in the 1600s. Let's examine it. The old world order is the new world order. So the Great Flood is what we call the first reset, and Babel Tower is the second reset. Babel Tower was in America, specifically Canada. As you can see the Babylonian region here. Babylonians spoke Akkadian. Acadia stretched from the northeast to Louisiana, where we get Cajun from, Acadian. Nimrod was the world leader during the time of Babel. He was a Hamitic leader in a Shemitic culture because Babylon was mixed. The people of Nimrod were Nebros, the basis of the word Nebraska. The Midwest is mostly Hamitic, Mitzrayim, Mississippi, etc. In Jasher, Esau kills Nimrod and usurps his power over the Anima, over humanity. This process exhausts Esau and causes him to sell his birthright. Esau then forms a confederacy and attempts to forcefully take back his birthright. It was the Yoruba or Oyo Empire. Europa is Yoruba. Look, Rome is Edom. Edom bred with Canaanite women and then Chittim to make Rome. And the Phoenicians are a Canaanite arm of this confederacy. Arab means mix, a mixed branch of this coalition. And the original Arabs are a mix of Edom and Ishmael. Arabs today are muwalads at best, the origin for the word mulatto. And Mecca is Baka. Baka is synonymous with Edom and his mom, Rebekah. And there's obviously an Aruba, Yoruba, Arab connection. Edom took over the Babylonian holdings worldwide, and we see the Nigerian connection between Edom and Eri of Edu. Edu or Idume is Edom. And Nigerians are some of the original Iranians and Indians. Nigaristani, look. The Maurya or Maurya. Scottish Freemaurers, look. And this is where the Moors come into the fold. Here's the Moabite-Esau connection. Many Moors are Moabites. And there's an obvious Nigerian-Scottish connection. Skotos means dark. And Scotia means Oyo in Yoruba. Look. Oyo also means owl, like this owl. The coalition started in America, that's why we see the Yoruba or Haitian phoenix buttons as far west as Alaska. An expression of the Phoenician connection. Phoenicia started in America. And the supposed first people of Haiti are the Taino, but the origins of that name are Italian. Italy is Edom and Taino means occult, and those Taino Lombards were bankers and merchants. These are the people that funded the Spanish colonization of the Americas. Look. Habsburgs are inbred Edomites. Edom means red, Rothschild means red shield. Rothschilds are inbred Edomites. The original Edomites are ruddy, red-brown. Sticking with the Italian theme, let's look at the Barbados connection in the next mutation. Barbados is a demon and a duke. Edomites are dukes. Look. Duke, Doeg, Dug, same thing. There's a high concentration of Doeg in Washington, D.C. because Rome is Edom. This coalition is everywhere. Look. See? First to the supposed New World, supposedly. Barbados, the bearded demon. The origin of the Berbers. Look at the pitchfork. Barbados. And sugar is demon fuel. It makes sense. This is the coalition of the rebellious, or the adversarial. The coalition spans the whole realm and comes in every shade of skin color. They have mixed with and usurped every bloodline. All the leadership is compromised. They are what Ezekiel called the sword of God. When the leaders don't work together, the followers lead. Let's talk about how the old world order is the new world order, who the Moors really are. Much of their history has been whitewashed by others and by themselves. A Moor is a very broad term. It is a group of groups. Not only were they whitewashed in the art, they also whitewashed themselves. They were some of the first to breed with their slaves. They were the black Huguenots in France. They were obviously the Moors of Spain and Portugal, but also the Sephardim. They were the black British, who Marcus Garvey descended from, and they were the black Habsburgs of the Holy Roman Empire. It's important to remember that Rome is Edom. Japheth and Edom crossbred to make Rome. Here's the genealogy. And Edom or Esau was ruddy, just like King David. Ruddy means red-brown or copper-colored. There was never really a fall of Granada. It was a transition into recessive Moorish rulership. The royalty was inbred so they could be more easily controlled. Even the Rothschilds are just recessive Moors controlled by their so-called black masters. And it wasn't just Europe, it was the Americas as well. They brought millions of these clones or slaves throughout the world. Millions. The biggest slave port was Charleston, known as the Jerusalem of American slavery. Charleston was named after King Charles, aka the Black Boy, the Moorish king. The 1670 Virginia Act prohibited Aboriginals from buying Christians. Christians were white slaves, being sold by Moors. Black nobility and the black popes get their origins from the Moors. The Black Dutch streamlined the slave trade. It is said most slavery was through Brazil and was conducted by Moritz, aka Moorish. That's why Jan Jansun was the founding father of New Amsterdam, aka New York. Moorish Europe worked together in Barbados or Barbados to displace American Aboriginals, commonly mislabeled slaves. In terms of modern Moorish rhetoric, most have to start with Noble Drew Ali. Ali was a quasi-Islamist, although this man was the one who built the original Canaanite temple in New Jersey. Ali claimed that black Americans were Moabites. Moab and Canaan are both inbred, so it's not a good look. Moabites are Shemites, but they are not Israelites. They're actually adversaries to the Israelites. Ali mysteriously died shortly after Claude Green Bay. Then Fard Muhammad pops up to start the Nation of Islam. Fard pushed the Yaqub theory or the Jacob theory. This is against the Israelites, though the Moors were the ones mutating and crossbreeding with their slaves. Fard Muhammad ushered in Elijah Muhammad, who was also a PDF, and that's why Malcolm X is killed and replaced by Louis Farrakhan, born from a Sephardic Moorish father. In the 60s, people switched from the English spelling to the Dutch spelling of Moor, and the indigenous American concept became popularized. Look. Leaders like York pop up, not a good look. Tariq Bey becomes a big influence, and the Washita Nation. Many claim to be from Lemuria or Amurah. Many claim to be from Calafia, the island of California. But California is Canaan, the land promised to the Israelites. The tribes of Israel, or Jacob, Yaqub, are patrilineal though. And Egypt is Mitzrayim. This whole Midwest and Mexico area all the way to Arizona is Hamite land. Missouri is Mitzrayim. So who are the mound builders? Many so-called black Americans are the offspring of black colonists and aboriginals. The Moors make up most of the shadow government of the earth. Their pale clones are just front office people. Let's talk about who the Moors really are. Much of their history has been whitewashed by others and by themselves. World government has always existed and will all. The Mormon Church is the American Vatican, started by Joseph American Vatican. The name of the Mormon Church is the American Vatican, started by Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith was a Freemason raised by a Freemason. The name of the Mormon territory is the Deseret, which means honeybee. The beehive is a prominent Freemason symbol. The foundations of Mormonism are Masonic. This is Masonic culture by another name. How can you really separate the two? Joseph Smith was deeply into the occult and witchcraft. He used a crystal ball and seer stones. And he was definitely a PDF. He ran for president and wanted to start a central bank. After his death, Brigham Young took over. And he brings them young too. He led the Mormons to Zion. They knew that the real natives were Israelites, many of which had become deluded. They went into Mexican territory, but the land had been ceded to the U.S. around the same time. You see, the Spanish had a tiny force policing the area until the clones could take over. See? Then they just started bringing the incubator babies in mass with the Perpetual Immigrating Fund. Then they took part in the local slave trade. Look. They then amassed a massive mutant force and began to occupy a massive area. You know who was there. You know who you're dealing with. Is it coming together yet? The Seal of Solomon. It's used to control demons, or genies, jinn, programs. It's widespread. The Masonic symbol is a derivative. And again, we get this common adoption grooming theme to train the clones as kids and use them for stuff like this. Then we get the Council of 50, a secretive group filled with Masons and non-Mormons. They sought to advance the Mormon agenda and world government. But first you gotta get rid of the remnant and the hybrids. Yeah, they wanted Utah, but they really wanted Nevada and California. They knew it was the Holy Land, but they came for the gold. They developed so much power that their women could vote 50 years before the rest of the women in the country. But that was only to stifle the black vote. Feminism itself was created to combat black political power. You see who funded women's lib. This entire religion was fabricated to occupy the real Holy Land. The gold, the culture, the DNA of the host. They knew what they were coming for and they knew where they were going. It is a clan, not a bloodline, that spans the whole world. They have infiltrated all the bloodlines, usurped all the cultures, and inverted everything. And then they try to guide the resets. The original class of clones knew. The ones today are mostly oblivious. Whether it be Drake in New Albion or Hernan Cortez, they were coming for the same things. Cities of gold, and the people of light that made them. Who do you know that rug pulls like this? Over-leveraging and embezzling. And who do you know gets away with it? Here we go again. Guided reset. It's always the same clan controlling the controllers. I said what I could without getting myself deleted again. The Mormon Church is the American Vatican. Fake. Slavery was fake. Slavery was fake. Slavery was fake. There were prisoners of war, though. A slave is a genetic determination, a Slav. These are prisoners of war in prison camps. Most of the men were slaughtered and the women and children were taken captive into slavery. These are just some of the examples of Aboriginal slavery that they tell us. Most of the men were slaughtered and the women and children were taken captive into slavery. These are prisoners of war in prison camps. Most of the men were slaughtered and the women and children were taken captive into slavery. These are prisoners of war in prison camps. Most of the men were slaughtered and the women and children were taken captive into slavery. These are just war in prison camps. Most of the men were slaughtered and the women and children were taken captive into slavery. These are just some of the examples of Aboriginal slavery that they tell us. This is only possible because the tribes were divided. This is ultimately why the resets happen. There have been at least 5 resets. That is why we see different eras of architecture in the Tartarian infrastructure. The fall from Eden was a reset. The Great Flood was a reset. The Tower of Babel was like a super evolved 5G tower, a communication tower. This reset changed the ether and scrambled the thoughts. Sodom and Gomorrah was a reset, indicative of meltology. As you can see, the mountains were the buildings. There are examples all over the Americas. The so-called natives identify with a low-tech culture. That's how you know they weren't the original people that were here that experienced those resets. They merely moved in. Native means born here, not Aboriginal. An Englishman that's born here is technically a native. Exodus was a form of a reset. The crossing of the Baja from Mexico, aka Mitzrayim, into Canaan, aka California. And finally we have the Babylonian exile, which was the slave trade. The slave trade was actually from North America to South America via the Caribbean and vice versa. Those slaves were prisoners of war. Aboriginals. Millions of North American Shemites were brought to South America, and many South American Hamites were brought to North America. People lost wars and were shipped to the Caribbean. They were then reclassified before they were shipped to their destination. The average life expectancy, slavery